Over the years, we've explored so many aspects of the Christmas story in its original context, but we've never tackled the gifts of the Magi. So in this three-part series, we're going to look at the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, understanding what they signified back then and what they can signify for us today. So let's begin with the gold. As we dive into the Christmas season, you're probably hearing the same thing in your own home if you've got kids, which is conversations around gifts. Whether you love or despise this about Christmas, gift giving has just been part of the tradition of Christmas for a long, long time. And it provides us with an opportunity to talk about the first gifts that were given to Jesus. And our foundational passage for this series comes from Matthew chapter 2, verse 11, which is where we get the gifts that the Magi give. And it says, "Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." Now, those are three items we can rattle off very quickly. We know the Christmas story. But let me just ask you, have you ever stopped to consider why these three gifts? And specifically, why there were just three? Why not 10? Why not more than that? Why three? Well, traditionally people have said, well, that's because there were three Magi and they each gave a gift, hence why we have three gifts. Well, that actually comes from a hymn from the mid-19th century, a hymn that many of you know probably pretty well, a hymn called "We Three Kings of Orient Are." Now, that's the opening line to this hymn. The problem is that these Magi are almost certainly not kings, and almost certainly there weren't just three. What the hymn does get correct is that they are bearing gifts and they have come from afar. And that's key because they're bringing very valuable gifts. They are coming from a long distance, and we know that they create quite a stir when they show up in Jerusalem. Three Magi don't do that, but an entire caravan, that will create quite a stir. And so most scholars believe that we're probably dealing with 10, 20, maybe 30 or more people in this caravan bringing these gifts to Jesus. Now, this is not a teaching on the Magi per se. In fact, we have tackled this in previous Christmas series, and I would recommend you go check out Brad Nelson's teaching during our Characters of Christmas series on the Magi to find out more about who they are, where they're coming from, their connection to the Parthian Empire, and why that had Herod very concerned. But for our purposes, as we think about the Magi, it's important to at least explore where they're coming from. And according to Matthew, they come from the east. And so as we jump onto a map here, we're dealing with two different options. And the first one is like really truly from the east. You can see here on the map, Iraq and Iran, which corresponds to ancient Babylon and Persia. Now in Jesus' day, this area was known as Parthia. And many scholars believe that the Magi are coming from the east and coming from this area because it's here where the Magi would have learned about the coming Messiah King from the Jewish people who were exiled to this region by the Babylonian Empire, and that would have started in 605 BC. And so this would have been remnants. This would have been, hundreds of years of people passing on the stories that the Magi eventually knew and then responded to when the star appeared. So that's the first option. And if the Magi are coming from this direction, then they're coming from anywhere on this green line. Now, the other option is actually from the very southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, all the way to Yemen. And this is where the ancient spice route was. And this is one of our other options for where the Magi are coming from, somewhere on this blue line. They may not have been all the way down to present-day Yemen. Maybe they were in South Saudi Arabia, or some people even posit that they were much closer to the land of Israel, coming from the ancient city of Petra, which, as you can see, is also on the spice route line here. And Petra is just an amazing city from the ancient world. So we've got two options here. Now, when you think about option one, coming from the Parthian Empire, the area of Babylon and Persia, Paul Wright notes this problem with this being where they're coming from. He writes, "A difficulty with a Persian or Babylonian origin of the Magi is the gifts brought to the Christ child: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. None of these products are native to Persia or Babylon." Now, this isn't entirely problematic because through trade, very wealthy people like the Magi would have been could have gotten their hands on gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But Paul makes a huge point, which is maybe where the Magi are coming from is actually connected to products that are native from their place of origin. So back on our map here, we can see that the world's supply in the ancient world of gold actually came out of a region called Nubia, which is in North Sudan today. And an amazing empire, and this is where all the gold was coming out of. Now, through trade, the gold could have easily made its way onto the spice route through the Red Sea or across the Red Sea. But when we get into the frankincense and myrrh, now we're talking about maybe more of the origins of where the Magi are coming from, because those items are grown in Ethiopia, Somalia, so the Horn of Africa, and then in present-day Yemen. And so we can see here that the Magi may be coming from this part of the world. Now, for those of you who are like, that doesn't sound like they're coming from the east, correct. That is where the problem also lies with thinking about option two. Now, some people have said, well, for the Jewish people, anything east of the Jordan Rift Valley would be considered to the east. So even option two, coming from the Yemen area, is really more south-southeast. It could still be seen as from the east. And in our next episode, we'll talk about some other connections to the Queen of Sheba, which is modern-day Yemen, that also connects into some other passages why people believe option two. But whether it's option one or option two, or maybe there's some other variation there, here's what we can say for certain. They're coming from a long way away. If you look back here on the green line, anywhere on this route, you're talking from 900 to up to 1,500 miles away. And on the spice route, the blue line here, you're talking about the same. This is months and months and months of travel to get to the baby Jesus. Now, one of the things that most of you probably are aware of is that the Magi did not show up on the night that Jesus was born. That was the shepherds. The Magi are coming up to 2 years after the birth of Jesus. Now, some of you, maybe this is new for you, and you're like, how are you getting that? From the text. Notice here what we have in Matthew chapter 2. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under. Why? In accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So when the Magi show up into Jerusalem and have their initial conversation with Herod, they give him the timetable of when the star arose, and that was up to 2 years, because why else would Herod kill all the baby boys 2 years old and under? You know, maybe Maybe he had ascertained that it had only been a year since the star had risen, and Herod's like, I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to go beyond it and make sure that I get rid of this king to be, or so thought to be a king, this baby. But for the Magi, they're coming much later after the birth of Jesus. And so we don't know exactly when they show up, but we know that they're coming from a long way away to bring these valuable gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So let's just spend a few minutes talking specifically about gold. Why are the Magi bringing gold? Well, this is not going to surprise you in the least, but gold was the most precious gift that you could give or receive in the ancient world. This is something that you just expect. In fact, if you look at gold, frankincense, and myrrh, of the three gifts that the Magi give, the one that is of gold makes the most sense to us. I mean, even today, we talk about gold being far superior than any other metal, and we even have that in the Olympics, right? This is a tradition that has been carried on for a long, long time. But when it came to gold, it wasn't just the most precious gift that you could give or receive in the ancient world. It was a gift that was usually reserved for royalty. It was a gift that was given to kings. And gold was given to kings, they were given to rulers, they were given for the purpose of talking about or symbolizing somebody's rule, someone's authority. In some cultures, gold was seen as being associated with something that was eternal, something that was permanent, of course, something that is precious and beautiful. And so it makes sense that the Magi are giving gifts of gold to Jesus, who they believe is a true King of Kings. Now, well, what kind of gold did they actually give to Jesus, or probably more fairly to say, to Mary and Joseph? Okay, well, it might have been coinage. That's one of the things that they could have given by way of gold. They could have given something in the lines of jewelry, whether it was a necklace. Very ornate gold necklaces have been found in archaeological excavations from the ancient world. Whether it was a necklace or maybe it was a bracelet, these would all be considered gifts of gold. You can also give some sort of utensils. Bowls and cups were also a traditional gift to give, especially to someone of royalty. They would often use these items in order to, of course, just do simple things like drink liquid. But here's what we can say for certain about the gifts that the Magi are given in this realm of gold, is that when they gave the gold, this was a costly gift. It was something that cost them something dearly. And don't just think monetarily here, although that is a significant part of it. It was a costly gift financially. But recall back, they're coming from a long way away, likely months of travel, carrying these gifts in order to give them to Jesus. They were costly financially, they were costly from a time perspective, and they're costly from an effort perspective, and yet that didn't matter to the Magi. They gave this costly gift because they believed Jesus was worth it. And in giving Jesus this gift, it was meaningful for them as well. Because one of the things I think we can all agree upon is just this idea that the most meaningful gifts are the ones that cost us the most. You know, think about some of the most meaningful gifts that you've ever given. They were probably as such because it cost you something to acquire them or to make them or to be able to have the situation done in such a way to be able to present them. I know that outside of my home and anything associated, with my vehicle, the most expensive gift that I have ever given was an engagement ring to my wife. My wife and I have been married now for 21 years, and I see that ring daily, and I'm reminded of what it cost to put that ring on her finger And yet I don't begrudge it in any way, shape, or form. I see it with a sense of pride because it wasn't just a gift given in a costly manner when I was young and didn't have hardly anything to give, but it's just a symbol of what our marriage has meant since then and how much it costs to love one another well and to continue to give one another these gifts of love and grace in a marriage setting. Just recently, on a little separate note, my wife and I were having this conversation. And we have 4 kids, and our daughter is 15 years old, and she doesn't play with dollhouses anymore. But one of the gifts my wife gave to her was a dollhouse that my wife's dad made for my wife. And when my wife and I were talking about this recently, because our daughter doesn't play with it anymore, my wife just said, I don't want to get rid of it because this was something that my dad labored over, and it's just been a symbol to me of his love for me, because this is just one of the many ways that he demonstrated it. You know, the things that cost us the most are the most meaningful kinds of gifts. And one of the things that we can say without question as we look upon these gifts that the Magi gave is that the Magi gave a gift that was costly. And so as I have been thinking about this particular gift of gold, one of the questions that I have been wrestling with is there any kind of costly gift that I need to be giving in this season? You see, one of the things that I know about myself, and it's probably also true of you as well, is that we are really good at giving out of comfort or convenience. That we typically take the path of least resistance. But rarely do we really think about giving a gift or doing something that really costs us something. Because we often have very much of a preservation mindset, or we recognize that there might be a need, but I'm only going to give enough that still keeps me comfortable, because if it starts moving into making me feel uneasy about it, it feels too sacrificial, and we often hold back. We aren't open-handed and generous with gifts that cost us something. And yet that's exactly what the Magi gave. And they received such a sense of joy knowing that the gift that they had given cost them something. But Jesus was worth it for them to put the time and the energy and the effort in order to be able to give this gift to him. And so I just want to leave you with this question. What costly gift do you need to give this season? Where might God be challenging you to move out of the boundaries of comfort and convenience and moving into an area of more sacrificial giving, whether it is of your time or it is of your finances or it's something else? What may God be calling you to do this season that will actually cost you something? But don't look at it as something that you are losing. Look at it as an opportunity of doing something meaningful, and I guarantee you will be blessed in return for doing. So friends, there we go. Part 1, the 3 gifts of Christmas. Gold, may we be people who give costly gifts for the purpose of benefiting others.